Hello and welcome to the next Marvel panel discussion and review. We are continuing our X-Men series that we started the week before Far From Home, and we've only got Callum this week, sadly.
All right.
Although I say sadly, I mean I'm glad to have you on, but
Yeah.
it's Anthony couldn't make it again. Hopefully he comes on for something with the X-Men. Yeah, hopefully he makes some appearance, but it'll be just us for this one, and it is the sequel to the last film we reviewed in this series, which is X2, X-Men United, one of the weirdest names for a film I've ever heard.
For me, it's just it's X2 or X-Men 2.
Yeah,
that's all it is for me.
I feel like that's the most early 2000s movie title name I've ever heard. X2, X-Men United. It's not the best. Anyway, before we talk about that, patreon.com/Genesis of Androzani if you'd like to contribute to the channel. We have certain tiers. We can get stuff like early access, exclusive access, and requesting videos for us to do. Twitter.com/Giandrozani. I'm a lot active now, especially with the Doctor Who stuff. Very active on there, so just check that out. And if you want to get in contact with us, it's there too. Those are the plugs. Right. So this one's going to be a bit of a impromptu review because there's not a lot. I haven't written down any notes, but hopefully we will be able to hash it out and we'll be okay. So, Callum, your first time watching this film. What are your initial thoughts?
It's a weird one because I didn't have that much expectation for it after watching the first one, which I thought was just okay, but I had quite a few problems with. I think more just production, acting, performances, and stuff like that were the big issues I had. With this, I think it actually was. My initial thoughts is that it is a massive improvement on the first one. I think performances are way stronger. I think the overall story, I think, is more interesting and better than the first one. It still has that sort of aura of 2000 superhero film, which I don't mind because, as we know, Spider-Man 1 and 2 are great films and they're set within this era of superhero films. So that could obviously mean it's great. But with this, I think it's a good movie and it's definitely an improvement on the first one. I still think it's good, but I don't think, for me personally, it doesn't go beyond that. I think there are a couple characters that I thought would get more development that gets nothing at all. And there are other characters that I liked from the first one that are better in this one because they're more interesting and they're getting more story and development. So it's a very mixed bag, but definitely more positive than the first one, I would say. It's a fun ride, maybe a bit too long, especially in the third act, but overall is a massive improvement on the first one.
Mm-hmm. So my experience with this was interesting because when I was young, I remember this one was always my favorite of the ones that I'd seen of the X-Men films. But weirdly, I had quite an odd experience with this, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the film begins in quite a weird place. I feel like this film has some very odd structure choices in terms of the way it introduces itself and just the way it happens. It feels like this film feels like it starts in the middle, and it's it's a very odd film, I think. And when I got to the end of it, I wasn't quite sure how I feel about it now. I don't know. My experience with it was very strange. I just, I was quite surprised because it was very different from what I remembered. I remembered when I was younger enjoying it quite a lot, but this time I just found it odd. Hopefully when we talk about it, we can sort of flesh out my thoughts a bit. But yeah, I was very surprised at how disconnected I was from it for a lot of it. I find that interesting. But yeah,
that sort of reminds me of like how I felt about Homecoming. I think that's a good comparison for me. it's like I used to think that Homecoming was like one of the best MCU films or one of the best Spider-Man films. Not my favorite, but I still thought it was very, very good. And then when we rewatched it, I had such an odd experience with it, where there were a lot of things that I noticed that I just didn't like, and then it just amplified. Still thinking it's good, but it was a very odd experience. I think that's a good comparison to make, I think.
Yeah. So, yeah, why don't we start with some of the characters? So, Logan, aka Wolverine. Yeah, what was your thoughts on him specifically?
Again, probably my favorite character in the film, because I think I'm just so attached to Logan. He's the most defined character out of the main X-Men, I would say, probably apart from Professor X, but I think that's sort of a different case. I think out of the main like four, I think he's the most defined and the most you relate to. I think Hugh Jackman again pulls off another great performance, I think. And I think what I like about what this film does with him is that it like hints at his past, but it never tells you exactly like who he is or he was at his past. It gives you hints like he accepted, like he volunteered to get the metal inside his body to become Wolverine with along with his claws. So I find that was kind of a shock kind of thing for me because I didn't actually know that at all. So that was quite interesting to find out. I think him just in general is the most fun character in it, I would say. And it gives you, like I said, a little tidbits about his past that make him the most interesting character, I would say. So I would say he is probably my favorite character in the film, and it makes me want to learn more about his past because they've given me little splices of what like I wouldn't expect his past to be. So I'm interested to see where they go with that, which makes me like more invested as him as a character going forward. It's just whether that revelation will be disappointing is what we will find out. But in this film alone, I think he's very good and probably my favorite character.
Yeah, it's interesting how like when I think about these films we've done so far as a whole, I'm quite sort of it's quite a mess in my brain trying to comprehend my overall thoughts on X-Men 1 and 2. But I think when you break down into different segments, I definitely think that Wolverine is always a highlight. He's one of the characters that is always really good in these films from what I've seen, and that was no exception in this. Weirdly, I think I said a comment. I may have said this in the first X-Men review, but I feel like he's just very underutilized, and I think it's because he's such an interesting character, and yet they go for this whole team focus thing with these films. Yet
Yeah.
he is so much more interesting than the others.
Yeah.
And part of that's to do with the performance, and other parts of that is the fact that his actual backstory is interesting.
Yeah. I
There's
agree
just
with that.
like there's a section in the middle of the film where he's like with these other characters, and it's I can't remember which one is it. Is it it's the boyfriend of Rogue? What's his name?
I can't remember, but he's the one with
Right.
ice powers. I
Right,
remember.
yeah. So like they go to his parents' house, and like Logan starts drinking beers from the fridge. So like the thing is like with when I was watching that scene, I'm like thinking like he's so much better than every other character around him.
Mm.
It's kind of a shame that he's so he's slotted into these teams because I feel like
Yeah.
he is so much better when he's by himself. Like because it's the focus is on him, whereas like whenever other people are around, it makes him seem out of place because I feel like his personal backstory is more interesting than the actual story going on around him.
Yeah. I find like I feel like this film what I don't like. It feels like it keeps like from the first film, it continues this love triangle, which I'm not a huge fan of, and it feels like it at times interrupts the main plot, especially because like one of my biggest problems I have with this film is that one of the characters I wish had more development was someone like Cyclops, but he's gone for the entire second act and doesn't actually do anything else.
Mm.
And him being associated in this love triangle really not only doesn't develop him, but it holds Logan back as a character.
Yeah.
Like from really focusing on him. What we get like on his own, I think is great, but the love triangle is the biggest thing for me that feels like that's holding him back.
Yeah, one thing that I am looking forward to though is that regardless of the quality, because I know that with all the ones I'm about to mention, the quality is very mixed. But the fact that there are actually 3 films that focus purely around him
Yeah.
in this series, I think that for me at the very least, having him taken out of that team aspect is good, and I know that because you've seen Logan and I've seen the Wolverine, and I know that even though there's high chance I may rewatch that film and not like it as much as I did before, because that's definitely the case with this film, X-Men 2. But at the very least, I know that having him as a focal point of the film rather than as part of a team is certainly something that I find more interesting to sit through.
Mm.
But then again, X-Men Origins Wolverine apparently people say is one of the worst in the series. So
Yeah.
I could be proven wrong by that. But yeah, that seems to be the common theme for me is that I love Logan and I love Wolverine, but I just wish that he had more of a singular focus. I
Yeah.
wish that these films were like Iron Man, where he's the main character and it's not a team. If you know what I mean? And
Yeah. I
I
get what you
prefer,
mean.
I would prefer. I know it's done like 10 years beforehand, so it's not like they really had the tools and they didn't really know how to make it work. But I would much prefer this if it was Wolverine films that led to X-Men films rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
Because that's how the MCU did it with Iron Man, and it was much better. It's
Yeah,
much
and it
better.
works.
It's much better watching the Avengers, having seen Iron Man 1 and 2, than it would be if they did the Avengers first.
Yeah. Uh yeah, I kind of agree. I feel like this film do suffer a bit when the best character gets a bit restricted back a bit, which is
Yeah,
Logan. But I do think the good parts of him in this film are really good, I think. I think they do his sort of like mystery sort of like pass really well. I think they
yeah,
don't they like I said, they don't give you too much but give you enough to be a little bit more interested in it. Like I mentioned with him being told that he volunteered for it, it's something I didn't know. So I'm quite interested to see why or how it sort of happened and stuff. So I think they do a good job at like giving you reasons to care about Logan, along with him being a great character, along with because of the performance. So I give credit to the film, but actually giving me hints of what I am looking forward to learning about Logan and his past.
yeah. I think my favorite scene in this film, which I'm sure we'll definitely get onto later as well, but like my favorite scene in the film, especially in terms of the performances, is after Jean Grey dies, is the scene with Logan and Cyclops. It's that I think that's the point in the film that my interest is peaking,
Mm,
especially considering the performances in it. Very like
yeah,
the reaction from Logan and that is very. It really is quite different to everything else that we'd seen from him at that point,
yeah,
and I think that to me is a big part of what makes him such interesting and relatable character.
yeah. I
Is
think,
the
I think after Jean's death, I think Logan and Cyclops's performances are probably the best in the film.
yeah
I think their reaction is so realistic and not feeling so forced. Like, I think it's very, very good between
mm,
those two. But that's not surprising as those two actors are really, really good. So I give credit to the film for actually like, even though I didn't feel like emotionally invested like I think the film wanted me to be. I still felt that it was very realistic and still made sense.
Yeah.
and was well acted and performed.
Well, I mean, as soon as we've brought up Cyclops, we might as well do his little bit here. Is that, like, I just feel like he's one of those characters that has so much potential, but he never gets the screen time.
Yeah, like this is like I think that's probably what this film faults at the most for me is that they're a character that is interesting and you want to learn more about, but you cut him out of like half of the film, and then when he's in the film, he doesn't do anything. I feel like that's the biggest misfire I think this film does for me. It's like he's the same character as he was in X-Men 1 and doesn't really change apart from his partner is now dead. That's kind of it. I don't think he really goes on an arc. He doesn't have his own story, even with his limited time. And it's kind of annoying. Like it does quite annoy me that Cyclops literally doesn't do anything in this film other than just be there.
Yeah. It's the character focus in these films seems to be very misguided.
Yeah, I would say so.
I think it's not what it should be.
Yeah, exactly. Like we said with X-Men 1, where the best three characters were Magneto, Professor X, and Logan. It's sort of the same here for me. I think there are a few characters I think are better from the first one, and they have good performances and they're interesting. But again, it still feels like that it's stuck in this sort of mud of it's good, but it could be so much better, and they're not executing it well enough.
Yeah.
Like I do still do like Cyclops, but like we said, he doesn't do anything. I like people like Storm and Jean, but again, they don't seem that interesting overall.
Yeah,
what they do is interesting, but it's very
so
odd.
you bring up Jean Grey, I was going to mention next. It's like her death scene is so well executed, but I just wish everything else with her was that well executed. If her character was more interesting, then that death scene could have been even better.
Oh yeah, 100%. I feel like
and I think actress.
What they set out for Jean makes sense, and I think can work. I think the execution is quite middling. I think it doesn't work completely, but I think what they set out to do could have really worked. And could have gotten you really invested in the character.
I also think that actress who plays her is really good too. She's one of the most captivating performances in these films. I just wish that she had more. Like her character was more.
Mm. Yeah, I'm sort of this. I feel the same. Like I think the actress, you can tell she's a really good actress, but it just feels like she doesn't feel like a character is fully fledged. Doesn't feel that developed as much as you would hope it would be. And then the death scene, while it's really good, doesn't feel totally earned. Like I don't feel like the death scene, while it's really good and it's executed good, and the acting all round is great, I think it's not earned. I don't think it's earned that right to make me feel totally emotional about it, about the situation.
I remember even when I was young watching this film, thinking that felt early.
Yeah, it felt very early for me.
Yeah. So it was like, we're almost just about to get to her character, and then boom, she's gone.
Yeah, I think I know that she does come back. Like I know that, and that's just because I know the internet. But just from like thinking about this in time when it released, people not knowing shit was going to come back. I think it's a big mistake killing her when she isn't even that fully developed, where she doesn't, just feel like a character you can really connect with. So I feel like it's very premature, I would say, killing her off.
I just find that odd though, because these films are like 2 hours, 20 minutes, and everything still feels undercooked.
Yeah.
It's odd.
It's a really long film. Like I felt like the film was coming to like its final act or wrapping up the final act around an hour and a half in. Like, I feel like it went through so much stuff in the hour and a half, and then the third act, its pacing is very slow and very like jarring at times, I think. So I think that's the biggest thing, where it feels like there's so much going on, but nothing gets developed properly, or
Yeah,
nothing is like as good as it could be.
yeah. The pacing of this film is odd. It's
Mm.
doesn't open up particularly well because it's just so just the film started. Da-da-da-da-da. Like we've started the story. There's no
Yeah.
like sort of warming up at all, and then
Yeah.
the final act sort of happens, and then you get the death scene, and that's the point. That's the only point where it feels like, oh, I actually know where I am in the movie. When Jean dies, that's the only point where I'm actually like, okay, I know exactly where we're gonna be.
That's the final conclusion, really. Yeah.
Yeah, but like everything before that, it's quite confusing, and not in a good way.
Yeah.
It's I wouldn't say the pacing is quite as bad as Venom, but
No,
it's
it's nowhere near. It's nowhere near as
yeah,
bad.
but it's certainly odd.
Yeah, it's definitely odd. I think it goes too quickly at the start and then goes to a halting pace near the end. I think that's the
Mm.
best way to sort of describe it.
Yeah, and I would say that comparatively to the first X-Men, like at least with the first X-Men, even though they had first X-Men had a lot of problems, like we said, at the very least, there definitely felt like there was a sort of clear-cut structure where you
Yeah,
there was a warming up process, and then there was a middle act, and then when as soon as they went to Liberty, you knew that this was like the climax. And I'm not saying
yeah,
that every film has to be predictable. I just feel like when I was watching X-Men 2, I was quite confused. I was a bit like, oh, this is very strange, but like it doesn't. I don't see why. I don't see what the purpose of it is. Felt
yeah,
like a bunch of scenes stitched together. And
yeah.
I think part of the problem with X-Men 2 is that there's lots of individual scenes that I remember, but I don't remember the sequence of them.
Mm.
Um, yeah. So, we anything else we want to say about Wolverine, Cyclops, or Jean Grey?
I just think that while I think Logan is the best developed character in this film, even though there's still feels like he's been held back a bit. Those two characters, Jean and Cyclops, I feel like, especially Cyclops, they feel very underutilized and very undercooked. Like you said, not getting a much development, especially Cyclops when literally he doesn't change. He's the same character as he was in X-Men 1. It's very odd. So I don't have much confidence, but I hope that we at least get a story with Cyclops. I think that's the
Mm.
biggest thing for me. I know like the more interesting characters are like Logan, Professor X, and Magneto, and that's fine. But I still want characters around the story to still like have a purpose. Like,
Yeah,
and I don't think Cyclops really has a purpose.
yeah. Um, right. So let's move on to the next character, which is Professor X.
Uh, uh, mm, I'm I'm mixed. I think he's still a great character, and he's still very well acted, and Patrick Stewart is great. I feel like he does take a bit of a back burner in this film compared to the first one, though I do think like obviously the whole like conclusion of the film is him being like basically like illusion to kill mutants, and then it's turned to human. So he is like the thing they need to stop and save, basically. But I feel like the character itself does take a bit of a back burner compared to the first one. Still
Mm.
very interesting and still well performed, but I do think like because obviously he gets kidnapped like halfway through the film. I think yeah he does. Um, and it just feels like he isn't as in the film as much as I hoped he'd be. I think. I don't think there's anything inherently bad that he does in this film, but I think I might have preferred to see him a little bit more than we did.
Yeah, yeah. He was sort of being mind controlled for a lot of it.
Yeah.
Um, and he also, when he was there, he felt like he was being used to dump exposition as well. rather than be his own character, which I found a bit disappointing.
Yeah. That might bring it
Um,
up. Yeah.
but I would say like every scene that he has with Magneto is great.
Yeah. It's always great that.
Yeah, but yeah, like you said, he certainly has a lot less of a presence in this than he did in the first.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. I would say.
Surprisingly so. I didn't expect that because I thought that from memory I remember him being in it more, but I guess he's not. You know, this may be one of those situations where I get some of these films muddled because
Yeah.
last time I watched this was in like I watched X-Men 1, 2, and 3 within a week on TV.
Mm.
Uh, so it's possible that I may be getting the different films mixed up in my head. But yeah, surprisingly, rewatching it, he wasn't as involved as I thought he was.
No.
Um, even though he's kind of like marketed as like one of the main characters, it's odd.
Yeah.
Again,
It's just very odd. I would say so.
that's a general problem with this film is that everything feels odd. It's all sort of mismatched. I don't know. It's difficult to.
Yeah.
This is one of, I think out of all the films we've done so far, this is one of the hardest ones to talk about.
Yeah.
I really don't know because it's so weird.
Yeah. I think that I overall like I do feel positive, like I said, about this film. I just think there's a couple things that seem very odd in the way they're executed. When like you just look at it as like how it's structured, I think the story is very interesting. I think it's good. I just think the execution is just a bit messy at places. I
Hmm.
don't think Professor X doesn't do anything like bad or anything that you would say, oh, that doesn't make sense, or I don't like that. It's
Hmm.
more so that it just feels like like I said, he takes a big back burner comparing to the first film. So, and it feels like that the whole beginning of the film where he like says to Logan, like, when Logan says there was nothing there where he was going from the first film, and we see him arrive in the beginning of this film, it feels like that gets pushed aside a bit. Like, missed obviously Professor X knowing more about Logan than Logan knows about himself.
Hmm.
I feel like that gets more transition into the villain of this film, who knows a lot about Logan, which I guess does make sense. But I think I was more interested in like the sort of Logan and Professor X dynamic. I think, and there's not really any of that in this film. I would say there's only a couple scenes, but it's not as much as I would like. I think that might be the biggest thing for me, which
Yeah.
what I liked from the first film that isn't in
Yeah.
this.
Well, I mean, Professor X was one of the backbones of the first film that really kept it
Yeah,
going.
yeah,
Um,
I he definitely was.
yeah. Another interesting character for me was Magneto, and the reason why is he kind of becomes like he's almost on the protagonist's side for a lot of it. It's
Yeah.
again, it's odd, but he is very enjoyable. I find, like especially like in the sort of comedic way. He's
Mm.
whenever he's being funny, it's always very funny.
Yeah.
But I think I got a little bit confused when it's the scene when their ship is crashing and Magneto stops it with his hand. Everything after that point, I couldn't quite figure out why he was helping them. Like, did you pick up on that?
I sort of assume that, well, because the whole thing is like they're using Professor X to kill all the mutants, and because they're all mutants, they have to work together to make sure they don't die. Because I think they all agree that they don't want to die.
Yeah,
So you can sort of say like that's the sort of reason as to why. But I found it very odd that they were very trusting of him. I
yeah,
think that was the biggest thing because like I would have I would because I think most superhero films now when you have a villain who returns for a story and is on the protagonist's side for like a portion of the film, there's always that thing where they like keep an eye on him, like they always have someone watching him in
yeah.
case he does something, and they
Like
didn't do that in this film.
like they did that with Loki in Dark World and Ragnarok.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
But in this film, it seems like they were way too trusting of him. because then he changes it from mutants to humans, and then they're trying to kill all the humans. So it feels
Yeah.
like they sort of fucked up in that regard, like by letting him go on his own.
Yeah, I thought Magneto was a very enjoyable little character in the film, but
Yeah.
not like he just wasn't important to it.
No.
It's like I said, I was comparing it to Loki. It's kind of like Loki in Dark World, where Loki in Dark World's not really part of the film, but all of his bits are enjoyable.
Yeah. That's a good comparison. I think it's very similar.
Yeah, although
I don't think.
probably
I don't think the film is nowhere as bad as Dark World. It's not even
yeah,
close, but
it's not
it's
as
the same,
noticeable though.
same
Yeah,
sort of similar. Yeah.
that's it's not as noticeable because it's not because Loki stuck out like a sore thumb in that film, whereas Magneto is a highlight, but it's not as noticeable because the film's not as bad.
Yeah. I think like Magneto's sort of like because what it does it sets out for like obviously a future film where in one scene on the jet he's sort of talking with Pyro, and it's very odd because I feel like they wanted to do this thing where Pyro became more rebellious, but it doesn't really do much other than like one or two things.
Yeah,
It's very odd.
yeah,
Like his sort of relationship with Pyro, and then he like Pyro at the end of the film joins up with Magneto, but it doesn't feel like it feels weird that even though he had no squirrels with like his friends, like at no point does he argue with them at any point. So it feels really odd that he's like, you know what, I'm gonna leave these guys and go with Magneto. That doesn't make any sense to me.
mm. Although one thing I did love about Magneto was when he
Yeah,
escaped prison. That was probably one of the highlights of the whole film. Is
yeah,
how he
that's great.
outsmarted Professor X. That was great. I love the sequence where he's breaking things through the glass and he like floats across the room.
Yeah, yeah. It was very a fun escape. I think
Yeah,
it was just very
but
satisfying.
but again, it's like I just feel like these characters like Professor X, Magneto, and Wolverine, they deserve to be in like top tier films because they are great characters. I just don't think that the films around them are that good,
Yeah, I
and it's
feel that
frustrating.
it feels that their stories are all the stories they could have that could be great. I feel that they're all stuck within the story, which is okay at best, and is
Yeah,
executed not that well.
yeah, and I remember having a very similar feeling about like Iron Man films, where it's like you've got like one of the best, well realized, well casted characters with Tony Stark. Everything to do with his character in those films is fantastic, but the stories around him aren't as don't live up to that character.
Mm,
If you know what I mean,
yeah,
um, and that's frustrating.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Because yeah, like Magneto is great, but just it's almost like he was only there because he had to be there because it was a sequel to X Men One.
yeah. Like because he was one of the better parts of X-Men 1, so they feel like we kind of have to have him in this film
Mm.
and give him a reason to be there and stuff. And then we're like, oh wait, no, he's still a bad guy. So it's
Yeah,
uh, like it feels kind of wasted in a way. Well, it's not like bad or terrible, but it just feels like it could have been so much better.
mm.
Like they could have given him a real reason to be in the film.
Yeah, and also we got Mystique again. I thought she had much more to do in this than she did in the first.
I actually
And
really liked Mystique in this film.
yeah,
Actually, I preferred
I
it to this.
see when I was going into this, I remember this being her first. I didn't actually remember that she was even in the first film. And the reason why is I always remember this film for her character, especially. And I think because in this she actually gets a lot more to do, and she
Oh
actually
yeah,
shows more of her personality. Like when
yeah.
she like
She's a
one of
lot
the
more personality in this
one
film.
of the one of the scenes that everyone talks about is the one where she seduces that guy into the bathroom.
Mm.
and then knocks him out. And then there's also the scene like after Wolverine and Jean Grey had their like moment. She like turns into Jean Grey
Mm.
and like tries to seduce Wolverine in his room, in his
I
tent.
really liked that. I actually really liked that. Those two scenes with Mystique, I thought they were very funny and also like quite like unique as well. But the concepts of them are quite unique
Yeah.
because like I think every time you see someone a bit odd and then you like, oh, they're probably like Mystique and stuff. But with that, especially the Gene one, I think the Gene one really like I had no clue that that was Mystique. So it's
Mm.
like very cleverly done, I think, where it doesn't feel like it's too forced. Like the moment of like, oh, Jean is finally like giving in to her affection of Logan. It didn't feel like forced, so you weren't like, oh, this is fake and stuff like that. So it was very
Yeah.
cleverly done, I think.
I always like when there's that one bit as well when like everyone realizes that she like Mystique has to do her thing for like what they're doing. So they all turn to her and she just smiles because she knows that she has to do something.
Yeah,
It's
it's like
almost
she
like
enjoys having. She enjoys her power so much.
yeah, but it's almost like they're like acknowledge. It's like a self acknowledgement of like an enjoyable plot device. I don't know how to
Yeah.
describe it, but it's almost fourth wall breaking with how they
Mm.
like recognize her powers.
Yeah, it's like if they like using her powers in very clever ways, with it being quite a simple concept that she can just turn into other people, but they use it in like fun, in clever ways. I think it's very interesting, and they do it very well. I think.
Mm. Um. Oh, one of the X-Men member that we forgot to mention was Storm. Um,
Yeah,
I feel like
Hmm.
she's just more of the same.
She's
Like,
more the same, but she's American now.
yeah, yep,
I
basically.
think I did enjoy the sort of like conversation she had with Nightcrawler. I think those are pretty good, but other than that, she doesn't really do much else. It's more of the same, like we said.
Yeah, she's a very generic character, and it's annoying.
Mm. But at least this time we can now fully understand her, and she's
Yeah,
not like talking, not almost like not talking sometimes
yeah.
in riddle.
I mean,
Because
she's
I don't know.
certainly.
Yeah.
I mean, she's certainly attractive, but that's probably just because
Oh
of the
yeah.
actress that they
Yeah.
cast. There's
Yeah. Halle
something
Berry.
about like there's something about like Halle Berry with white hair that looks very supernatural. If you know what I mean?
Mm.
It's very
Yeah.
angelic.
Yeah. It does. It doesn't feel like natural, but that's the point
Mm,
in a sense. So I think that's quite a clever like design. I think for having like someone like someone like environment type powers. I think having her like having sort of unnatural like hair, what you would assume.
mm.
It's quite a small detail, but it's something I actually do quite like.
Yeah, it's just annoying because she's got a
Yeah.
very generic character.
Yeah, it just feels like that. Other than the Nightcrawler stuff, it's literally more of a, it's the same as Cyclops, only she has more screen time, but she just doesn't do anything with it.
Yeah. Well, at least with Cyclops, there is a story.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, but he's just not in it.
Yeah, yeah. Um, who was Nightcrawler again?
Nightcrawler was played by Alan Cumming.
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah. I know exactly who you're talking about. Yeah, he was
Yeah.
a
It was
sort of
interesting.
comedic relief for a lot of it. It's weird how the
I
film.
didn't really feel comedic, but I think that they tried to go for that a couple of times, but it didn't feel like the traditional comedic relief.
Yeah, well, it wasn't as funny as like King James. That was
No.
for Alan Cummings.
No,
Um,
I really like Alan Cumming. I think like he's great in things that I've seen him in.
yeah,
I think in this was a very interesting performance slash sort of take on this character. It
yeah,
was very interesting, but also odd at the same time.
yeah.
I don't know how to feel.
When I was watching it, I was thinking like, this is the kind of character that Andy Serkis would play.
Mm.
Yeah, I would say much better than the character that Ray Park played in the first film, though. Much better. Like in
It
terms
was
of
just
just like,
oh yeah, Toad or whatever his name was.
yeah,
Oh yeah. Oh, 100%.
yeah,
Well, that was so much better.
yeah. But I definitely thought it was very odd that they started the film with Nightcrawler
Yeah, I
attacking
thought
the
that was such
president.
I thought it was a fun opening, but it felt weird to open a brand new character we had like literally zero knowledge of in terms of the
Mm,
universe. So it's
yeah,
very odd.
yeah. Um, then there was the main villain of the film, which I forgot the name of, but he was the guy who was involved in like making Logan Wolverine, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. I can't something Sky. I can't remember. It gave him an S or something. I can't
Yeah.
remember.
Mm,
But it was very. It was a very different villain than I thought we were gonna get. I think. Like, I
mm,
don't know what I was expecting, but it was very different from what I assumed where the franchise was going to go with its second film. So it was interesting. Probably not great, but I still think it wasn't bad. I think it was an interesting concept they went with. I
yeah,
think.
yeah. I'm just trying to think of any other characters because there was Rogue and like her boyfriend, and then also her
Rogue,
parent.
yeah,
Yeah, I forgot about
and
them.
Pyro, yeah. I think Rogue is a lot better in this film. I think the actress' performance is a lot better from the first one. It didn't feel like she was
Well,
whispering
the,
all the
the
time.
thing is, the thing is, I feel like she's much better as a side character than as a main character.
Yeah, I think so. I think she works a lot better, and it feels like she's a bit more free to be a little bit more like fun. I think, or just being more a little bit more like not as forced on.
Mm,
So I think Rogue in this film is a lot better. I do think the performance is a lot better as well.
yeah. We got a lot more development for her boyfriend character, which was what's his name again?
I can't remember. I can't remember his name or his superhero name.
It's just like he just freezes stuff. He's the
Yeah,
opposite of Pyro.
yeah. He's the opposite of Pirate, and he's. It feels like they tried to give him a lot more like development and like making you understand what he goes through, but then after when they leave his parents' house, he doesn't do anything after that.
Yeah,
He sort of just sits in the chair for the rest of the
yeah,
film. So it's
yeah,
very weird. It's like they're setting up this sort of like him not being accepted by his parents and like his own brother. And it feels like after that, when you could have had like a scene between him and Rogue talking about how like he's not accepted by his family, but they could have been like, well, this is your new family now.
yeah.
They
These film,
don't really do that.
well, like I said, these films just have too many fucking characters. It's just none of them get developed.
Yeah, none get really developed. The ones that actually could be like very interesting, they don't.
Yeah, yeah. Like I think you could probably argue that this is a better film than the first, but in terms of character development, I think this is worse because I don't think
Mm,
any character in this film gets a proper development, really.
no. Yeah, I think there are things that they do better, but I think in terms of character development, it's probably it's either like I think it's probably below the first one.
Yeah, because none of them get full development. They're all just either
Mm,
none or middling or undercooked.
yeah.
Yeah,
And it's a shame because I did really like the concept of his family like not accepting him, even though they've been like, "We still love you" and stuff. But you can clearly see on their faces
yeah,
and their expressions. So
yeah,
it's a shame that they didn't go further than that.
yeah. I think that's another one of the problems is that we've been spoiled with films that do these big lots of characters in one film that have lots of
Yeah.
character development. Like
Mm.
Civil War, for example, has so many characters in it, yet they all get a lot of development.
Something. They all get something.
Yeah, like think about like you know like Vision, Scarlet Witch, Black Panther, Spider Man, Hawkeye,
Yeah.
Ant Man. Like all these characters get some, and then that's just supplemental to Iron Man, Captain America, and Bucky. It's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah, it is. It's like I guess that's like hindsight is like how to do a really good superhero film, like make its characters feel important. So like it's easy to criticize it now with it being from 2003, but it's still stuff that they absolutely could have done. I think especially with characters like that who are side characters that they begin to develop them, but then don't give a final sort of piece for it to wrap it up.
Yeah, but yeah, there's definitely something to be said about the fact that the bar for superhero films in general has been raised to a very high level,
Yeah.
to the point where they are now being judged alongside other great films that aren't superhero films. Because back in the day, you could easily say that, oh, it's okay because this is a superhero film; it doesn't need to be that good.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
but now we have examples of it working really well.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah. So
Um,
it's like, yeah, like you said, we're a bit spoiled with like films that focus more on character than it does on like being cool and flashy. I think so. Like in this film, it's action scenes. I think are a lot better than the first. It is way more fun to watch, but I think characters just don't get as much development as you
yeah,
hope.
and that's not me saying that I think all films now are better because it's not true at all. Like we got Captain Marvel this year, which was an absolute turd.
Yeah.
Um, so it's and you know, there's like Venom was not a good film either. So it's not like that's anything that's changed overall. Like we still get shit films now,
Yeah.
shit superhero films. We still get those, but the there are films that have changed our perspective on these kinds of films,
Yeah.
like Civil War, like those kind of films that have so much focus on character that it's hard not to compare them.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, going back to X-Men 2, I thought Pyro was a genuinely like good surprise though. I enjoyed Pyro
Yeah.
for what little screen bits and pieces he had. I thought he was a really cool character.
Yeah. I think the stuff he is given, I feel like is quite interesting. I felt like he could have gotten a little bit more though. Like I said, it feels like it's so weird and doesn't make much sense that he just leaves the X-Men to go with Magneto because it doesn't feel like he has any reason to leave them. So it's
Hmm.
very odd. Like at no point because like he after when they are being like arrested by the police, he then takes the fire and like is violent. But I doesn't feel like at any point that like Rogue or anybody sort of talks to him about it and he sort of disagrees with it because it feels like that scene is missing and it makes much more sense after when he then goes with Magneto. You'd be like, yeah, that was the turning point for him to like sort of turn his back on them, but we don't get that at all, so it's very odd.
Yeah, it is odd. Um, but I really
But
like this. I really like the scene where the police come to the house and he
yeah,
just sets them all on fire.
yeah, the production on that is actually quite good. I really enjoyed that. I think it is done very well. And I am interested to see where they go with the character, like how he sort of changes, I guess, and what he does in the next film. So, yeah, I'm very interested to see where they go with it. I just wish that the turn was way more convincing and made sense. That's just the biggest problem I have with Pyro's character.
Mm, yes. I don't remember what Stan Lee's cameo was in this film. Did you see it?
No, I didn't see it.
Did he even have one? I swear he's been in all of these films because he was in the first X-Men.
Yeah, I mean, I missed him in the first on my first view, and then I didn't see him at all in this one, so I don't know. The only things I can think of is that if he's in the very beginning where they're in the museum, or if he's in the White House at the end. That's the only things I could think.
Yeah, because this is one of the ones where I haven't actually noticed if he was there or not.
Mm. Yeah, I didn't think any point he was there. Like I forget that he's in these films.
Yeah, he was in the first one, but it was
Yeah,
but I think you missed it when you saw it.
yeah. It felt very like blink and you'll miss it. So it's very.
Maybe
I don't
so
know.
that it was very possible that it may have been the case with this one too, where I missed it.
Yeah.
But yeah, any other characters there are that we want to discuss?
Um. I don't know. I can't think of any other character.
I suppose there was the
Like
president.
you get the president who's in the beginning and the end of the film. I think I do like the final scene. I think with the president and the X-Men,
Yeah,
I actually really like that.
yeah, that was cool.
And they're sort of setting up that a war is coming. I think they said this in the first film, and then they've said this in this film that a war is coming. So I'm interested to see where they go with that, like
Yeah,
the war between the mutants and the humans, if that gets developed on, or if that actually happens. So I'm interested to see where they go with it.
yeah. I'll be interested to see what you think of it because I have seen where that goes.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be very interested to see what you think of it when you see it because
Yeah,
it's one of the more divisive parts of these films. It's that
yeah.
storyline.
Like I know these films all like are very divisive, so I don't know what parts are liked and what parts are hated. So I'm
Yeah,
assuming and
I
hoping that
think
this
I'm pretty
war gets developed on.
I'm pretty sure when they came out, X-Men 1 and 2 were well liked. But
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
think so.
100% on that. I'm not 100% on that. I just don't know. I
I
think
just think as time has gone on, I think there have just been better iterations of like team films or just regular superhero films
yeah,
with multiple characters. So it feels like this feels it lacks in some departments compared to them,
yeah.
but it's still very positive, I would say.
But
It's
one
just
other
yeah.
one thing I will say there was even though I do think these two were well received, I don't think they were anywhere near as popular as the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films though.
No,
They
absolutely
weren't
not.
they weren't to that level.
Like Spider-Man 2 was coming out a year after this came out, and the difference in quality I think is pretty drastic, I think.
Yeah.
Like,
I
while this is
I'd
still good, it just feels like it is inferior to even
I would
films from its same time.
I would even say Spider-Man 1 is much better than these two films.
Oh yeah, I would say that as well.
Yeah.
That came out a year before it as well. So
Okay, we're back. We're back. I'm just looking at the Wikipedia now. There are a few characters that we didn't mention. So was Colonel William Stryker the one that we'd already talked about, like the one that
yeah, he's the villain. Yeah, he's the
Okay.
villain. Yeah.
He's the villain. And then was the president was Senator Robert Kelly? Was that the president, or is that?
Uh,
Oh no, it says he was killed in the first film.
oh yeah, that's who Mystique is playing at the beginning of the film because
Right.
she played him at the end of the last film, so they continued that in this.
Rightio. And then there was so it's Bobby Drake, aka Iceman. That's Rogue's boyfriend.
Oh right, yes, but I remember now. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Pyro's real name is John Allardyce.
Yeah.
And the only other one we didn't mention was Yuriko Oyama, aka Deathstrike, who is a female mutant who has a healing ability like Wolverine's and is controlled by Stryker, and she has adamantium fingernails. I remember she died and she had like liquid coming out like her eyes, nose, and mouth. That was a cool scene.
Yeah. I think the whole fight scene was really good.
Yeah, and then there was a bunch of extras like Mutant 143 and Kitty Pryde, I think, was the one that can walk through walls. Just a whole bunch of random mutants.
Yeah. You've got Colossus was in this.
Yes,
the guy who
that's
turned
right.
metal. So
Yeah. But yeah, I believe that's all of the characters. It doesn't say that Stanley makes a cameo here.
right, okay.
So maybe he doesn't actually make one, but I'm not 100% on that.
Mm.
But yeah. So this film was written by Michael Dougherty, Dan Harris, David Hayter, and Zach Penn and Bryan Singer. I think they may all be the same as the first. I'm not
probably. I would
100%.
assume.
Yeah. I can't be sure on that, but I think they may have been similar to the first.
Yeah.
But they do look very similar names. But yeah, I just thought that it was, whilst there were certainly good moments and great ideas and some great characters and others that could have been great, it's just the overall putting together of this film feels very mashed.
Yeah. I think this film is better directed than the first one. I think the
Yeah.
action scenes are a lot better. I just think it's a bit messy. I think the
Yeah.
story
I
and the
do.
characters.
I will say though, I am happy of the way this film embraces its comedy more, because the first one was so restricted.
Yeah.
Obviously, the original script for the first one had Joss Whedon comedy in it, and they only kept a couple of his lines.
Yeah.
Whereas this felt more like it was free to be funny.
Oh yeah, definitely. I would say it's way more like like let back of its seriousness. I
Yeah.
think, and it sort of enjoys itself more and
Yeah.
allows it to be more fun.
Yeah. I feel like that's one of the things that makes Mystique such an enjoyable character, and Magneto as well, is their comedy. And in the first film, it felt like they were being a bit too serious.
Yeah.
I like when Pyro jokes about Magneto's helmet, and then like Magneto's like, that silly helmet is what's protecting me from all these attacks, or whatever he says.
Yeah. It's very funny.
Yes. But yeah, the writing on the film is, in terms of entertainment, is certainly an improvement, but in terms of structure, I would say has gotten worse.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say so. I
Yeah.
think, I think we've mentioned this quite a few times, that I think the overall story, while it could be executed well, it just isn't. I just think the
Yeah.
execution is very poor.
Yeah. There's
at
still a
times.
long way to go. There's still a long way to go in terms of improvement for this
Yeah.
film series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
And by the sounds of it, unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it ever really gets there, aside from
No,
maybe a few films.
yeah. Like it seems, yeah, like obviously from my knowledge, that it kind of just gets worse.
Yeah, yeah, it's unfortunate.
Maybe there'll be a few parts that are better than I think they'll be.
The only films from this series that I've heard give actual positive reception to are Deadpool and Logan. That's it.
Yeah. Maybe there'll be one or two hidden gems, but I'm not confident.
Yeah, but I thought this one was going to be the hidden gem from memory, but it's not. Sadly,
It's just better than the rest, which isn't saying much.
yeah. So, yeah, yeah. It's like yeah, it's like when you're like, oh, what's your favorite episode of Series 11 of Doctor Who? You're like, well, there's a few that I liked, but are they really that good?
I mean, It Takes You Away is I think the best one, because
But
it's
even-
concept, and yeah, but even then, it's like
It's got so many
a few things that
problems.
it's still like there's a few things that they could have done so much better.
Yeah. Yes, that's a good way to put it. X2 is that It Takes You Away of X-Men films.
Enjoyable and it looks nice, but it's surrounding elements of its whole franchise within its time. It's like it could have been so much more, but it's executed poorly.
Especially because of, as we said, like Wolverine, Professor X, and Magneto are such great characters that should be in great films, but they're just not.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. The director was Bryan Singer. He was the same as the first, right?
Yeah.
So I would say that the visuals in this film are much prettier to look at than the first.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's still I think there's still room for improvement, but it is better in terms of the direction. I would say it's better.
Yeah, I think the best direction in this film is like probably during its action scenes, and I think the first opening scene is actually directed very well. I think the opening is like very
Mm.
exciting and it's very nicely like cut together.
Yeah. And the CGI looks a lot crisper too.
It looks a lot better.
Yeah. Um, really shows like I mean this. Funnily enough, this came out the same year as Hulk, so
Yeah.
that's interesting. But comparatively to the first X-Men, the CGI on it is so much better.
hmm
It's not ugly.
No, it's a lot more prettier to look at and it's a lot more clean and crisp, I would say.
Yeah. Um, and then the score, the music, was done by a man called John Ottman, who I'm pretty sure didn't do the first one because the guy who did the
No.
first one passed away, right?
Yeah, you said. I think I remember you saying.
Yeah.
So I don't mean the second one.
Yeah, so John Ottman's done The Usual Suspects, The Cable Guy, Incognito, Halloween H20. What else has he done? Fantastic Four 2005.
Wow.
He did he did Superman Returns,
Oh.
and he did Rise of the Silver Surfer. And Halloween the Night He Came Back. Jack the Giant Slayer. Oh, and he also did.
Oh, I remember that.
And he's also done a couple of other X-Men films, like Days of Future Past and Apocalypse. And he did The Nice Guys as well.
What an odd list.
Yeah, very strange. I feel like a lot of the ones he's done have been like the redheaded stepchilds of like the early 2000s, like Superman Returns, and like the Halloween films that people don't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't exactly recall much of his score for X2.
No, I feel like the first two films really are deprived of like good music and good themes.
I think part of the
It-
problem is that we always compare them to like Danny Elfman's scores.
Yeah.
Because like around this time is like Danny Elfman was doing Spider-Man, and like John Williams was doing Star Wars and Harry Potter. So like there wasn't really much left to choose from,
No.
especially considering the score person they had the first film passed away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else we want to say about like the direction, writing, or score before we move on to the trivia?
No, I just think the improvement of the direction is very noticeable and is a lot better. But I think dialogue is better as well. I think in this film between characters, it's not as like caricatured
Yeah,
for
I
me.
just wish the dialogue is better. I just wish the character development was
Yeah.
better.
Exactly. That's the biggest problem. It's just like they start things but they don't really finish it. And the biggest example for me is Pyro.
Yeah, and also obviously Storm doesn't have a character, and Cyclops does have a character, but we don't see it.
Yeah. Yeah, like at all. Yeah. So that's the biggest thing. So
Yeah, I think that's
again,
so
I'm
odd.
not confident going into
I think
the
that's
next
so
one.
odd that Cyclops has a story, but we don't see him much. Storm has so much
Yeah.
screen time, but she has no character.
Yeah. It's like all of like Storm screen time should have gone into like Cyclops, and it's really annoying.
Yeah, and if you were going to give that screen time to Storm, you may as well have gotten her to actually have a personality rather than just that's what we're doing. Let's do this. Let's do that.
Yeah.
It's yeah. It's the
Mm.
kind of thing that you would expect on like an X-Men cartoon, like that kind of characterization, rather than a feature-length film.
Mm.
I reckon X-Men could have worked really well as like a TV series, honestly.
Yeah, I feel the same. I mean, it
Just
did as an animated series, so but like
yeah,
as a live action TV series, it actually could have really worked.
yeah. It just would have been really expensive.
Yeah.
And also back in those times, TV series didn't really get that much budget
No.
as they do now. Because nowadays it's just like, oh, we'll give it a film budget. I mean, you look at Game of Thrones. Like Game of Thrones looks better than most films that come out.
Mm.
But yeah, that's only in like the last 10 years that that's happened.
Yeah.
Right, should we move on to the trivia?
Yep.
Okay. During filming, Hugh Jackman's sister visited the set. As a joke, she was made up in Jackman's full costume and makeup and walked around the set. Apparently, she was very convincing as Jackman. Bryan Singer was not aware that it was not Jackman in the Wolverine suit and commented her work during the shooting that Hugh is acting very strangely today. Most of the extras playing frozen people were actually mimes who used to not moving.
That's pretty clever.
No, I forgot to mention that. That is one of my favorite things about Professor X is when he freezes people.
Yeah, that's quite cool.
So fucking cool.
Yeah.
And there is a specific scene. I'm not going to say which film it's in and where it is, but there is a specific scene where we get a frozen scene from Professor X that I think is actually a great moment. So I'm gonna hold myself on what that is.
Yeah.
But it's quite possible that the people that are watching this may know which one I'm talking about. But I remember that when I saw it, I was like, "Oh yes, yes!" But yeah, we'll have to wait for that.
Yeah.
So, although this idea did not carry into the movies, in the comics, Nightcrawler was the son of Mystique and Azazel. A member of the Hellfire Club who was introduced in X-Men First Class. Oh, that is a spoiler. I will not talk about that. Neil Patrick Harris auditioned for the role of Nightcrawler, but lost out to Alan Cumming, who speaks fluent German.
I mean, I think Neil Patrick Harris would have been a little bit weirder, and I think Alan Cumming is probably a better actor.
I think Alan Cumming has the perfect face for it.
Yeah, I would say so, and I think he has his like sort of goofy like way of acting. I think especially biggest examples like Spy Kids, and obviously with him being in the Witchfinders as well, he's like that's his sort of style. Like he's very silly, but can play a very serious. Like he can do serious moments as well. It's like he's a very like really great actor because he can do both silly, fun, but also very serious and heartfelt.
I reckon he'd be a great Doctor, honestly.
I think so too.
But, you know.
Like it'd be really good, I think.
Yeah. The ice wall separating Wolverine and Stryker in their reunion in the mansion battle was real ice and weighed 3,500 pounds.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. The replica of the president's desk in the Oval Office was so detailed that it took 2 months to build.
Yeah.
Professor Xavier's wheelchair from X-Men was bought by a lawyer who also worked for the same law firm as Sir Patrick Stewart's attorney. When the production began, the studio realized they had no chair anymore, so the lawyer rented it back to the studio, as Stewart said in an interview, for a significant sum. Sir Ian McKellen worked with the screenwriters to make the scene in which Bobby Drake tells his parents he is a mutant to look more like a common gay coming out scene.
Yeah, that was the comparison I realized that they did intentionally. Like they did the whole "we still love you" and stuff like that, but it's like very evident that they are not a fan of that he's a mutant. And I like how the mum asks, like, "Have you ever thought of not being a mutant?" I'm like, Jesus Christ, what a horrible family.
Yeah. Yeah, I think actually that was quite clever on Ian McKellen's part because it actually shows to people watching what it's like to have that in real life. To have
Yeah,
your
because
parents say that to you, you know?
it's like because like they're both different things but very similar. I would say the way that he present mutants in this universe, where like, they're not very much accepted and they feel like it's more of a disease.
Yeah, exactly. And common like a common sort of thing being like these mutants are born as mutants. It's not like it's their choice.
Yeah. Yeah, if it, in like context, like it's very odd how they're so freaked out about it. It's like all we can do is like turn water into ice or make ice. Like it's not that big of a change. It's just
Yeah.
ice.
Yeah, but I think it's the whole thing of like the fact that these parents, like their children are different.
Yeah,
And like now
like
there's and there's like a whole interesting political thing in the background about it, like what do they do with these mutants that were started in the first film?
yeah,
They just don't they don't develop more.
yeah,
So interesting.
yeah. It's like so interesting. Like if I found out that my kid was like a mutant and had powers like ice and stuff, I'd be like, "Yo, that's actually really cool." Like I wouldn't. I for me personally, I would find that really cool. I
Yeah.
think it also depends on the power as well. But I think their reaction to him controlling ice and making ice is like, I think just like for me personally, it's like that's a bit much. Like all we can do is make ice.
Yeah.
With like Rogue, I'd be like a lot more freaked out. Yes, because
Yeah.
he's draining the life of
Yeah.
someone.
But when I saw that scene, funnily, like I didn't know that this trivia, but when I saw that scene, I was reminded of the scene in Years and Years when that girl wants to be like made into a software, and her
Yeah,
parents are like, "What? You can't do that."
yeah. It's actually like because of you said that trivia. It's like, oh, that's actually really clever in the way they did that. Obviously like noticed the comparison like when I watched it, but
Mm,
I'm like, oh, that was actually the intention as well. So that's actually quite cool.
yeah.
It's quite interesting.
The Arctic snow scenes were filmed in Alberta, Canada, in an area it's known for heavy snows. Naturally, when the production arrived, there was none, so the snow had to be recreated. I'm pretty sure it was the same thing with the first X-Men. They were supposed to be a snowy area, but they had to make it.
Mm. I don't know if it's on the trivia, but did you notice in like the first scene you see Logan how fake his hair looks?
Yes,
It's so bad. It looks really bad. It's so apparent.
his hair looks so odd in this film.
Yeah,
It's not. It's
because
so much
there are
thinner. It's so much.
times where
It's
yeah,
so much thinner in the middle.
and it's a lot thicker and like way more like stylish than it was in the first one.
Yeah,
Because
in the
obviously,
first
like
one,
they did a lot of like a few reshoots, so and obviously they had to give him his actual hair, but
yeah,
obviously he couldn't, and so
and
it's
there's
like
like
fake.
his sideburns look so much more fake in this one too, compared to the first
Yeah,
film.
I think there are bits where like it is his actual hair, but sometimes you can't really tell because like sometimes it looks so his hair looks so solid at times. It's like
Yeah.
very off-putting.
Yeah, especially comparing to the first film where it actually looked very natural.
Yeah, definitely.
I think his look from the first film was so spot on.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Um, uh, apparently Ellen Cumming left after this film.
Oh,
Which is a shame.
oh, so
Um,
he only does the one film. That's very
yes,
odd.
apparently it's because the crew believed it wasn't worth going through all the long preparation. And also Alan Cumming didn't enjoy putting on the heavy makeup because his appearance was minimal.
Yeah.
But because of that, Nightcrawler has been written into the video game series, I think,
Right.
or something like that. But like, yeah, apparently he doesn't appear again, which is a shame.
Like Nightcrawler doesn't appear at all, or they don't like recast him at all.
Well, I'm not sure, but I know that Alan Cumming definitely doesn't appear again.
Oh, okay.
But
Well,
I
that's a
think,
shame.
there's a chance that he may not. I'm pretty sure he doesn't appear in the next X-Men film that we're watching.
No.
So I'm not sure if he appears again, but yeah, it's a shame.
Yeah.
when Rogue falls out of the jet, the stunt was performed by Anna Paquin, not a stunt double. That's
Oh, wow.
insane.
That's whoa.
That was a crazy moment, I reckon.
Yeah. I wasn't like expecting that, but then I thought she was like Mel. I don't think she was. I never thought she was gonna die, but I was like, wow, they actually made her fly out of a plane, and then you thought, oh, Nightcrawler will probably save her.
Yeah, but I remember when I saw the scene, I was like, wow, that's actually very well directed. Like the stunt. It reminded me of Iron Man 3 when they fall out of the plane. It's the same sort of thing. And that stunt in Iron Man 3 was also practical as well. Like everyone was falling for real.
Yeah.
It's insane what some of these actors will do.
Mm.
Frozen tea was put at the end of Wolverine's claws for the cat at Iceman's home to lick off.
You'd think, yeah, I thought that would be the case. I actually really liked that. That was really funny.
I just like that whole whenever Wolverine's just doing his thing, it's so good. I just wish we got more of it. There's a film that films based around just purely him will be better.
Yeah, it's like that's what I like, the sort of little moments that he has, like that. Because for example, it's like it shows like he is like he has a lot of like caring, like he cares a lot about things, even like creatures like that, like cats. It's like very like sincere and quite nice, I think. So it's quite nice to have those sort of moments.
Yeah. Unlike the first film where Rebecca Remigio Stamos, got it right that time, wore contact lenses, this time Mystique's eyes were rendered digitally.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't actually notice, so actually it was very convincing.
Yeah, I've noticed something with all these trivias is like actors just don't like wearing contact lenses ever.
No. Was Alan Cumming? Alan Cumming had like eyes, so I'm assuming those were also digital.
Who knows? Kelly Hu only has one line of dialogue in the entire film. That's the problem with these films, is like they're just so underdeveloped.
I can't even remember who that was.
I think she was the character that died when like all the liquid came
out.
out.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I don't remember what her line was.
Yeah, I remember I didn't really know who her character was until she died.
No. I didn't know who her character was until we saw the claws. Or like the things on the like claws on her fingertips. And I was like, oh, she's basically Wolverine, but a little bit different.
Yeah.
And I thought that fight was great.
The German phrases that Nightcrawler shouts to Storm and Jean in the Boston church are Gehen sei raus, ich bin ihr Butel Dafuyus, ich bin dies Ausgeburt der Bosen. They translate to get out, I am a minion of the devil, I am a spawn of evil.
Oh.
Oh, okay. Bryan Singer credits the X-Men. Oh no, skip that. Bunch of extra stuff that we don't need. Most of the exterior shots of the Xavier Mansion were recycled from the first film because there was no budget for them. I noticed that they had the same awful, just sunny faded shots of the mansion that were done with like a helicopter. I was like, oh, why do we have to have more of those? Thankfully, there was less of them. But like, they're my least favorite directed shots in both these films. Is those just why? Why would you have those shots? They're so ugly.
Yeah.
They're so blown out, like with sunlight, and they look red, like the way they're colored.
Yeah.
The set for Stryker's underground lair was built in an old Sears warehouse and was the largest set in North America. It involved over 60 miles of cable and was so large that the cast and crew members used bicycles to get them to and from the bathroom as quickly as possible. Even then, the production only used about half the space in the warehouse.
That's long.
The Lady Deathstrike claws were glued to the bottom of Kelly Hu's own fingernails. She had to grow them out a bit so that the claws would fit securely. Imagine if they broke. Imagine how painful that would be.
Oh, God.
Jean Grey's closing monologue is the same as Professor X's opening monologue in the first film.
Oh.
Didn't notice that.
No.
Rebecca Remigian Stamos' makeup took 5 hours to apply as opposed to the 7 for the previous film. That was probably at her request.
Yeah.
But Alan Cumming had to endure 10 hours of makeup to become Nightcrawler.
Yep. Of course.
God, there's a lot of trivia. There's the thing about these comic book films is there's so many references in these trivias to outside stuff.
Yeah.
Health and safety restrictions meant that helicopter blades were not allowed to be moving when Rebecca Remigian Stamos and Sir Ian McKellen were sitting inside the helicopter. The moving blades had to be added in digitally afterwards.
I see.
In an effort to keep the ending a secret up until the movie came out, the novelization and the movie comic have different endings. Interesting.
Oh, okay. That's quite
So
interesting.
is that in reference to Jean's death?
I'm assuming so, yeah.
Yeah. According to Bryan Singer's commentary, he removed a couple of seconds of footage after Wolverine stabs a soldier in the kitchen during the raid for ratings purposes, but the extended sequence can be seen as deleted footage in supplemental features disc. The extended sequence is also featured in the theatrical version in other countries, for example, Brazil. We need more violence.
That's what Logan is, though.
Yeah. It's like how in Spider-Man 1, the original, they had blood coming out of Peter's mouth, but then they had to digitally change it to spit for some stupid reason. It's like, why?
You can have blood on their face all around them, but you can't have them spit blood.
Yeah.
That seems so strange to me.
Entered into the Guinness Book of World Records as the widest film release, having opened on May 2nd, 2003, on 3,741 screens on the same day. So is that the record? It was the most screens on the same day. Well, that's probably been broken tenfold since then.
Yeah.
Like, imagine how many Endgame had on its first day. Probably like 10 times that much. Probably like 100 times that much, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, it made $1.2 billion in its opening weekend, so...
It's insane. This is the first time that longtime friends Patrick Stewart and Brian Cox have worked together.
Oh.
In the bar, the foam in the beer is fake. Bryan Singer chose to do this to avoid continuity conflicts.
Oh.
Halle Berry dropped out of the film Gigli. Gigli. Don't know how to say that. To reprise a role as Storm. Tyler Mane and Ray Park were originally set to return as Sabretooth and Toad until it was felt that the script was already overloaded with too many mutants. It's very likely, because I know that Avi Arad is working on these films, it's very likely that he had something to do with, like, overstuffing it.
Yeah.
I know
because there are characters, loads of characters that don't get any development.
Yeah, I know that he didn't technically produce his film, he produced the first one. But it's very likely that he may have had something to do with it.
Well, it says he was on executive producers, so...
Oh, well, there you go. He got promoted.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's X-Men seems like the kind of thing that Avi Arad would be like, oh, there's lots of characters, just throw them all in there. Magneto's helmet was redesigned from X-Men because Ian McKellen found the original very uncomfortable. I noticed that it looked a bit different, actually.
Yeah. I still think it looks good, though. So.
Yeah. Senator Kelly and William Stryker. Oh, sorry. Bruce Davison, the actor who plays Senator Kelly, and Brian Cox, who plays William Stryker, were only born 27 days apart. But
Wow.
Cox's character indicates that Senator Kelly is at least 20 years his junior.
Oh yeah, I remember the scene. Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah. Have I ever told you that I find it so funny that Batista is older than Triple H?
Mm.
The fact that WrestleMania 21, it was like the whole point of that was like, oh, the old guy puts the young guy over, yet Triple H is actually younger than Batista.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very weird.
Mm.
Wolverine's berserker rage when the school is raided had to be toned down to meet censor approval, but his full-blown berserker rage is seen in Logan. I'm looking forward to that.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, by the sounds of it, Logan just seems to be a very surprising film because X-Men's usually shit.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it's like, wow, one of the best superhero films ever.
Mm. Oh yeah, it definitely is. Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
I mean, a film based around this one character, I'm sure that is green light for me.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's a bit of trivia that's claiming that Ray Park didn't return as Toad because of scheduling conflicts.
Mm.
Hugh Jackman was given a nutritionist to get in shape for role Wolverine and gained 20 pounds. I just think like if they had done the MCU around this time, it probably would have failed.
Yeah.
Just like considering like how superhero films were made back then. I mean, I know that Spider-Man would certainly be like the star of it because it would have been around this time when the Raimi films were coming out. But like, I can't imagine like a Thor film, an Iron Man film, a Captain America film working in the early 2000s.
No, I don't either.
Even if you cast Robert Downey Jr., then it still wouldn't have been the same.
It would have been. It just would have been one of those things of like, this guy is perfect for this character, but the story around him is pretty trash.
Yeah, just like Hugh Jackman in these films.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't have had the CGI to do an Iron Man film.
No.
They just wouldn't have been able to
It
do
would have looked horrible.
Yeah. Angel and Beast were part of the original script, but dropped as it felt there were too many characters. Hugh Jackman worked with the same trainer who trained with Angelina Jolie for the title role in Lara Croft Tomb Raider. The red scar on the back of Cyclops' neck to signify him being controlled by Stryker was added digitally afterwards.
Oh, okay. I mean, they just forgot to put that in for makeup.
Who knows?
No, it's just easier to just copy and paste it.
The funniest one was like in Iron Man 2 when they gave Mickey Rourke a fake tattoo for Whiplash and then they CGI'd it out later on. Like, what was the point?
Yeah.
Shaquille O'Neal badly wanted to be in this movie and actively campaigned for a role.
Hey, I want to be in an X-Men movie.
I don't know what character he would have played.
I don't know.
The script went through 27 drafts.
Jesus.
Sounds very similar to the first one.
Mm.
And it shows though, but it's just because it's such a mess.
Yeah.
They should have just let Joss Whedon do it, like he was going to for the original.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
He clearly knows what he's doing. Uh. Bryan Singer credits Empire Strikes Back and Road to Perdition as influences on this film. Well, I don't know what similarities this has to Empire Strikes Back outside of being a second, like a sequel.
A sequel to yeah.
Ends in tragedy, I suppose.
But Han isn't dead though. He's alive but captured. That's the difference.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know what inspiration of Empire Strikes Back is in this film because I don't see it at all.
There are approximately 800 digital effects in this film.
That's a lot.
Like, it's a lot, but it just seems like that's so much less than what we've had for like all these other ones. I think for Thor Ragnarok, it was something ridiculous, like
it's probably triple.
It
was probably triple that.
Because like every scene has like visual effects in it.
Yeah, every shot has at least one thing that's digital.
Yeah. I'll be interested to see when we get to the Star Wars prequels what that's like, because I remember like the special features on those films, like the DVDs, are so interesting because of how many fucking effects there were. Like, it's insane. Like the reason why those films took so long to make, like 3 years, because of the visual effects, because they spent so long on the effects for them.
Yeah.
Recouped its production budget more than 3 times over.
I mean, yeah, it made a profit. Then.
Yeah, I mean, like, I can see like these films as like an attraction, especially for the time, no doubt. But I just don't think that they hold up in terms of story quality, really.
No, I don't think so.
Some of the posters on Iceman's bedroom walls are snow activities, skiing and snowboarding.
Hints.
Mum and Dad, how'd you not pick up on that?
I like things to do with cold.
To be fair, like, that's a bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
The crew were very specific that nothing but glass and plastic be used in Magneto's cell. He even wears white Crocs. The 6th highest grossing film of 2003. So I'm just trying to think what would have been higher. Pirates of the Caribbean: Curse of the Black Pearl, probably.
Yeah.
Finding Nemo, I reckon, would be as well.
Oh yeah, probably,
Films 2003. Return of the King, obviously, would be top. So that's 3. What would be the other 2? There's the 2 Matrix sequels, maybe?
That were released in the same year.
Yeah. Very odd.
Oh, that's so weird. That's so weird. You have... Has that ever been done where you have 2 major film franchises released in the same year?
I don't know.
Like obviously, like Infinity War and Endgame were released within a year of each other, but they weren't made in the same year.
And like and there's other franchises that have like part 1 and part 2 that are different years, like Deathly Hallows, Twilight, Hunger Games.
Yeah. So yeah, it's like those like they're like the same sort of thing because they were made both within the same amount of time, and yeah, but it's very weird to like.
It's so fucking weird.
It'd make more sense if like parts 1 and 2 or franchises were released within the same year because it's continuing the same story, but having two completely different films within the franchise is so odd to me.
1997 and then 2003 and then 2003.
Yeah, that's so weird.
Yeah, I can't think of another example where that's even happened.
No.
Like the closest thing is the MCU, but that even then,
Those are different
it's
films. They're not within the same person or character.
yeah. Like I suppose Tony Stark appears in Incredible Hulk, but it doesn't really count.
No, it doesn't count. Like it'd be weird if in the MCU they released Iron Man. No, it'd be make more sense if they did like Far From Home and then another Spider-Man film within the same year. But
Yeah,
that'd be kind of odd, very odd.
yeah. I don't know. Very weird. I can't think of another example where that's even the case.
Mm.
Just why would they do that?
I don't know.
Especially like it's odd, especially odd because the Matrix films are not easy to make either. Like they're very
No.
heavy on special effects. Maybe the
Yeah.
second film got pushed back massively, but the third one didn't.
Maybe.
But like it would be so much it'd be so much more like pleasing for it to be like 97 then 2000 and then 2003, not 97 2003 2003.
They should have at least delayed it a year. At least give it time to breathe. Give it time to be hyped up. That seems so weird. Like giving it no time to sort of just like give itself time to breathe or hype it up.
Yeah. Um 64 sets were used in 38 different locations.
Ooh.
Two former Bond villains and one former Bond girl appear in this movie. Alan Cumming and Famke Janssen appear in GoldenEye as supporting villains, and Halle Berry appears as the Bond girl in Die Another Day. And she did that film in between X-Men 1 and 2, funnily
Oh.
enough. Yeah. Have you seen many Bond films?
My dad and my granddad, I remember, especially my granddad, were like had like the entire box set of James Bond films.
Oh,
I
yeah.
remember. So yeah, my dad and my granddad, he used to watch them all. So yeah.
Yeah, but have you seen them?
I myself have like seen snippets of like different Bond films. The only one I remember watching in full and really loving it was like Skyfall.
Oh, yeah, that one's... I fucking
Yeah.
love Skyfall.
I haven't watched Spectre and probably don't plan to.
Right. Unless we do a series of it.
Jesus, that's too many films though. That's way too many.
Yeah, it could happen. You never know. I mean, I might do it. But it would be like one of those ones where it's like you gotta watch like 2 a week.
Mhm.
Because there's so many of them.
There's so many.
Yeah. But we'll see. We'll see. It's not on the list of priorities.
No.
And I've only seen about like not even 10, and I like those films, but fucking hell, like it's a commitment because it's hard enough to watch one because they're very long and they're very like you have to get into it to watch it, especially the older ones. But
Yeah.
watching all of them would be insane
Yeah.
because they're like almost all of them are close to 3 hours.
Yeah.
But Skyfall is brilliant. I'll
Yeah.
say that.
Skyfall was the only one. That is like the only one I've seen in full that I think is generally like great.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I found that the Daniel Craig films are very mixed. Like, 2 of them I really like, and 2 of them I really don't.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, uh, The Fast and Furious and X-Men film franchises have often released the same installments of a franchise in the same year. Although X-Men 1 and Fast and Furious 1 were released a year apart, this movie and Too Fast, Too Furious were released in 2003. X-Men 3 and Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift in 2006. X-Men Origins Wolverine and Fast and Furious were released in 2009. First Class and Fast 5 were 2011. The Wolverine and Fast and Furious 6 was 2013. And Furious 7 was almost released in 2014, same year as Days of Future Past, but was pushed 1 year forward because of Paul Walker's death. So that's interesting, actually, because we said the same thing about, I think it was the Spider-Man, the same year as like Harry Potter films, and they also came out like 10 years apart from the other Spider-Man films.
Yeah.
It was like Spider-Man 1 was like 10 years before Amazing Spider-Man 1. Spider-Man 2 was 10 years before AS2, and then Spider-Man 3 was 10 years before Homecoming. And one thing I always remember about when remembering like when these X-Men films come out, like the X-Men trilogy, is I remember they always come 1 year after a Star Wars prequel. Because this one comes 1 year after Attack of the Clones. And then the next one comes 1 year after Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
And the first one came 1 year after Phantom Menace. Yeah. So back then, it just seems like it always took like 3 years to make a franchise film.
Yeah, I think it's Now that it feels like there's like, because obviously like Homecoming and Far From Home are 2 years apart, so like, it feels like things get like faster as well, and they're doing it way more.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's almost getting ridiculous now, like how much Marvel pumps out in a year. Like 3 films.
And all the Star Wars films are like 2 years apart. The sequel ones are all 2 years apart instead of 3, like the original two.
And you've got extra ones in between.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we've had one Star Wars film every year since 2015.
After like nearly a decade without.
Yeah, and before that it was once every 3 years, and before that it was once every 3 years for the original trilogy as well.
Yeah.
One of the weird ones though is the Pirates of the Caribbean, because like the first one and the second one were a year apart, but then the third one was 3 years after the second one. That one's a bit odd, but it's not as odd as The Matrix. And then even weirder is Lord of the Rings, how they came 1 year apart, yet they are so much longer and have so many effects. But I think that may be because they filmed them all at the same time.
Yeah.
Or at least I know they filmed parts of the second and third one at the same time. The international cast in this film is vast, with Magneto, who is English, Xavier, who is English, Wolverine, who is Australian, Nightcrawler, who is Scottish, Rogue, who is a New Zealander, Jean Grey, who is Dutch, Iceman, who is Canadian, Stryker, who is Scottish, and the rest are from the US, including Deathstrike, who is Hawaiian. I forgot that the actress for Rogue was New Zealander.
Oh, yeah.
What if Taika Waititi was playing an X-Men character?
That'd be very odd.
I can't imagine it. A Taika Waititi directed X-Men film as well. That would be even weirder. Just can't imagine it. But then again, it's like if you said that like before Ragnarok came out, if you said like a Taika Waititi directed Thor film, you would have been like that you're crazy.
Yeah,
like,
you would have been that. Yeah.
Because like after seeing like Dark World, you would have been like, "There's no way that would work."
You can't save this character, yeah.
But like even the tone of the film as well, like you just can't imagine Taika Waititi doing Dark World, but then he did Ragnarok, which is so different.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going back to another point we had before. This movie is billed by Bryan Singer as the Empire Strikes Back of the X-Men film franchise. I feel like that's really reaching.
It's really reaching.
Like, I don't think this one is even that distinct at all.
I wouldn't say so, no.
I used to think it was, but it's not really.
Mm.
Like, I used to think when I was younger that this was miles better than the first one. I'd still say it's better, but not like by as much as I used to think it was.
Yeah. Like, I wouldn't say it's miles ahead of it, but I still think it's definitely an improvement.
Uh, mm, apparently, you know when Rogue was shirtless in Bobby's bedroom? Apparently, Anna Paquin was actually topless, but they didn't show it on camera.
That's a bit odd.
Uh,
Why wouldn't you just be wearing like a bra or something like one of the things like don't go over the shoulders but goes around the chest?
I don't know.
That seems really odd.
Because you only saw his shoulders.
Yeah, you only see your shoulder. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Well, you never know. Some directors can be very, like, pressuring for some reason.
Yeah.
It's quite awful, really.
Yeah.
Like how that
Yeah.
happens.
Also, I just don't think it was needed.
Yeah.
Because these are meant to be like kids in a sense, like young adults.
Well, these films are meant to be watched by kids.
Yeah.
Like, on top of that. You know, like when I first saw this, I was like 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, this film is 30 minutes longer than the first film. I think that was noticeable.
You can feel it. Yeah, you can definitely tell.
Which is why it's odd because the start of the film doesn't have any build up. So
No.
it's even with like the first film being 30 minutes shorter, there was also a build up period as well. So it feels like the story of this film is so much longer. It's like an hour long.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think so. I feel that it's unnecessarily longer, I would say.
Yeah. Uh Wait a second. What did Anna Paquin win an Oscar for? I find this really weird that Anna Paquin and Halle Berry won. Well, I mean, Halle Berry maybe obviously is not a big problem, but the fact that she won an Oscar, yet Ian McKellen and Hugh Jackman were only nominees, like, I find that very strange.
Mm.
Although to be fair, Brie Larson won Best Actress, so it's not like the Oscars have that much, credibility.
Yeah.
She won an Oscar for. What does it say? It says she won one, but it doesn't say what for. Uh, Also, she looks very different now. Like, much, like, as an older woman, she looks very different to how she did in these films. Oh, she was in a film in 1993 called The Piano.
Huh.
1994, she won Best Actress. Oh, that's the film. She won Best Actress in a Supporting Role in The Piano. Interesting. I don't know what The Piano is.
Uh,
Hmm. Wow, so going into X-Men, she was an Oscar winner. That's probably why they cast her.
Yeah, most probably, yeah.
Originally, Jean Grey fully transformed into the Dark Phoenix in this film.
Hmm.
Wow.
I know it's like her red eyes. So I'm like, oh wait, is that the Dark Phoenix?
So I'm a little bit like confused. I know it'll probably get answered when we watch all the films, but like some of the continuity in X-Men seems a bit odd because it's
Yeah.
like it feels like parts of it are and parts of it aren't.
Yeah.
Like I'm just thinking like so the Dark Phoenix that came out this year is surely not the same continuity as this film. But then
No.
like is it the same continuity as like the Days of Future Past era? Because that has Logan in it, which is in
Mm.
the same continuity as this. It's very weird. Maybe that's part of the reason why people don't like these films because the continuity's all over the place.
Yeah. I hear like the timelines is very mangled up.
Yeah, well, I mean, with a film called Days of Future Past, I'm sure that has something to do with it.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so that's all the trivia. So suppose it's time for you to give your conclusion and a rating of 10 for X2 X-Men United.
Right. X-Men 2 is a improvement on X-Men 1 for direction and action scenes. I feel like I'm much better, but what this film lacks in is characters getting proper development like a sequel naturally should. People like Cyclops are massively just pushed to the side for extra screen time with Storm for no apparent reason. Even though naturally it would make sense for a character that didn't get much time to develop in the first one to develop more in the second one. There are stuff with certain characters. While I do like the characters, it doesn't make much sense what they do by the end of the film. My biggest example is Pyro going with Magneto. I just don't understand why they give no setup to that other than one conversation. But other than that, I think the story is fine. I think the execution is pretty poor at times. But I do think direction and action pieces are a big thing for X-Men that are improved on in this film. And it definitely is a better film than X-Men 1. So I'm going to give this a 6.5 out of 10.
Yep. So I was surprised, unfortunately, in a bad way by this film because I remember it being one of my favorites from what I remember seeing. I'm not sure if that's the case now because this film to me is a mess. It's certainly better made than the first film, but the character development's poor and the execution in a lot of ways is quite poor. But certainly not a bad film, just a weird one. And it's one of those ones now going forward that I feel like I don't really ever have the motivation to rewatch because it just doesn't quite work.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, I think that over time these early X-Men films haven't aged well in the sense that their storytelling to me as I've grown up has become a lot more exposed for being quite messy. And it's unfortunate
Yeah.
because there's bits and pieces in these films that are great, genuinely great, and are memorable, like Wolverine, Professor X, and Magneto. I just wish that these films were more focused, had better character development, and were more enjoyable to watch as a whole because they just don't execute what they have very well. And that is unfortunate. And I think. Oh, now in terms of a rating, I'm just thinking the best way for me to do this is to compare this to other films.
Mm.
Honestly, I think I probably I'm gonna give this a 6 out of 10. Probably the same score I gave the first X-Men, but I would probably say this one's slightly better. But I can't say that I think this is as good as other films I gave a 6.5. Because, like, when I think about, like, Iron Man 3 or Thor or Ant-Man, like, those films have something in them extra that this film doesn't have.
Yeah.
Like, with Iron Man 3, like, the first half of that film, I think is actually very good. And there's, again, like, there's a lot of in those films that I enjoy. It's just, with X-Men 2, I just found that what I enjoyed was it wasn't consistent. It didn't follow through scenes. It was all very momentary, such as like the Jean Grey Mystique scene and the pyro fire scene, some of the action sequences in Jean Grey's death. It's very bits and pieces and quite all over the place, and it annoys me. It annoys me because I wish that I enjoyed these films more than I do. So yeah, unfortunately, I thought I was going to give this film a much better score than this, but yeah, for me it's got to be a 6. Unfortunately, which isn't encouraging because these two films are known to be two of the better ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I gave it 6.5, like I've put it higher than stuff like Spider-Man 3. Because I feel like this is a lot less messy than that, even though I feel like Spider-Man 3 has more heart in it. I just feel like Spider-Man 3 does more wrong.
I would say this is probably better than Spider-Man 3, but
I would say.
Yeah, I would say this is a high 6 for me. It's, because I gave, I'm just trying to think of films that I gave a 6 that are like on the high end. Probably like First Avenger is a good example. Iron Man 2 is another good example. Like those kind of films, I feel like this film is in that sort of category of has very good moments, but it's a bit messy.
I would say I think those films are just slightly better from this, is because I feel like it deals with his characters a lot better in execution. I would say people like Captain America and Tony Stark, their characters are so well defined.
Yeah,
unlike this.
The only thing I would say in contrast to that is I don't like the villains of those two films. Whiplash and Red Skull, I really don't like those villains. Whereas with X-Men 2, I was actually okay with the villain. It's just the story wasn't particularly interesting. Apart from, obviously, the Wolverine backstory stuff, which is always interesting. Yeah. But just very sloppy film this is. It's frustrating. Because it's like, I can just imagine if this was done again. Like, if these two films were done again, like, the whole Wolverine, Cyclops, Jean Grey thing could have been a focal point and made so much better. But they put too many eggs in one basket. Just so much going on. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But yes. Anything else we want to say about X-Men 2?
No, I think I've said everything.
Right. Which means that the next one we're going to be doing, which will be very interesting. I hope Anthony's on it because I know he's got some interesting things to say. X-Men: The Last Stand, the third in that trilogy. I have seen this film twice before. And yeah, it's going to be interesting rewatching this one.
I know its reputation, so it'll be very interesting to watch.
Yeah, and without spoiling anything, X-Men: The Last Stand has a very similar situation to the Justice League film, where the production was separated into halves. So yeah, yeah, that'll be interesting. Yeah, looking forward to that.
And that'll be the end of this like trilogy as well. It's like because like even though it continues, it's the end of this sort of trilogy of X-Men, this like core story.
Yeah, because after that, I feel like it gets very odd. Like
the thing kind of place. Yeah. So like this is you can almost consider it like the last sort of streamline X-Men film in terms of like consistency. Like it's same story that's continued instead of being like it's this story, but then we're jumping to this and then we're going back to this, or this is new and then we're going to this again. Yeah. So like that's what I feel this.
After this, you've got like Origins films, and then you've got like a reboot and a couple of like offbeat films too, like Deadpool, and then it just gets even weirder. And then you've got Dark
Yeah.
Phoenix. It's like I don't even know how that fits into it either.
Mm.
Yeah, it's odd, but I'm looking forward to watching it because I want to see like if it really is that bad. I want to see why, because like there's so many different kinds of bad. I'll be
Yeah.
interested to find out exactly what kind of bad it is. But yeah, X-Men 3: The Last Stand will be the next one. So yeah, see you then.